Researchers at NASA working on the Curiosity program have made a very large discovery on the surface of Mars. This one may point to the possible existence of life on Mars some time ago. Now, what they're doing right now on Mars is, as you all know, the Curiosity Rover landed there a while back, and it's been sort of driving around the Gale crater where it landed, doing all sorts of science. And it reached an area called Yellowknife Bay. And it's called that because it seems to have formerly been a large lake with a river feeding into it. So what the rover did was go up to one of the rocks and drill into it. That's the first time human beings have ever done that on Mars, so that in itself is pretty neat. But what it found is actually really impressive. It shows that the inner layers of the rock are very different from the outer layers. This means that the rock's surface was at one point protected from the atmosphere of Mars, the way it currently is, suggesting that this region not only had flowing water in it at one point, but it was also a place where life may have existed. Of course, to understand that a little bit more, I'll need to explain sedimentary rocks first.
The importance of finding a sedimentary rock is that it confirms that a process of erosion was taking place on Mars. The fact that there was running water and a lake in this Yellowknife Bay region, of course, suggests that erosion was happening. Erosion is basically when water, most typically bodies of water, but also rain and sometimes wind, can pick up little bits of rock off the surface of a larger one and deposit it somewhere else. And it creates these layers, and these layers harden and become a larger rock formation, or a sedimentary rock. Also found at Yellowknife Bay was calcium sulfate. Calcium sulfate can only really form in non-acidic environments, and if the environment was non-acidic, that suggests that the water that was there was perfectly safe and fine. In fact, we could drink that water and it would be just as good as water on Earth, or sometimes better, depending on where you're getting your water. But one important caveat to the findings is that no organic carbon compounds were discovered. These would be the basic building blocks of life, like amino acids and sugars. Although even those weren't discovered, that doesn't mean that didn't exist on Mars at some point. It also might be that Curiosity's tools simply aren't precise enough. In fact, several more tests are going to be run on the findings to ensure that what Curiosity has discovered so far isn't simply contaminants, or basically stuff that stuck to it on Earth before it was sent to Mars. So while this isn't ironclad proof that life existed on Mars, it certainly suggested that the circumstances were very conducive to life existing there. And of course, we've only just got started on our search.
Another area of our solar system that might be featuring some life is Jupiter's moon Europa. Now, Europa is coated by an icy surface, a fairly thick layer of ice with a water ocean, of course a water ocean, all oceans are water, but an ocean underneath it. The only question or not is whether or not there is any life in this ocean. Now, we don't have any evidence one way or the other. We simply can't get any instruments close enough. But a recent bit of findings have shown that the water underneath the ice surface is actually salty. Salty, much like our own ocean, in fact. And that might be a good indicator that there might actually be some kind of life.
Now in this cross-section you can see how water from Europa breaches the icy shell and reaches the surface. It's sort of similar to how geysers form on the Earth, or even volcanoes, really. And that's how we can sort of get an idea of what the water is like. Now, of course, we don't actually have a sample of Europa's water. We did use a spectrometer to identify some of the features on Europa's surface, and through some deduction we realized that the ocean underneath the shell of ice actually contains magnesium chloride salt, which is a lot like the oceans we have here on Earth. That suggests that Europa is either a really good candidate for life, or may actually be supporting life today.
Now, the origin of life, or abiogenesis, as it's more commonly called, is still a bit of a tricky thing. We're not entirely sure how life began on Earth, never mind these other areas of our solar system where life may have or may currently exist. Still, researchers are getting a bit closer to understanding, and R.A. Kaiser and a team of chemists from UC Berkeley have recently published an experiment in the Astrophysical Journal, which may shed some light on where life sort of originates in the universe. And basically, the idea is that a comet arrived, hit our planet, and deposited the building blocks of life. And you might be wondering, a comet with life on it, how does that even happen? Turns out, based on their research at least, that sort of event where the beginnings of life are created in the universe are a bit more common.
Now, one thing I should say first is that we actually find the basic building blocks of life, or I should say basic organic molecules, all the time in meteorites. It's actually pretty common, and they fall to Earth fairly frequently. The only problem is they aren't really complex enough to form the structures that would be required for the type of life we see on Earth today. Now, what researchers wanted to find out is if these basic organic molecules could be influenced by cosmic rays, which are relatively common in the universe. So what they did was take these organic molecules, expose them to high-energy electrons, which simulate cosmic rays, and the results were that several complex molecules were created. These complex molecules would be the basic elements for creating life as we know it. While none of these findings are the smoking gun of sorts that suggests that there is extraterrestrial life out there, it does suggest that it's entirely likely that that is the case, even if what we find in our own solar system doesn't result in any life having existing or currently existing. Certainly with the millions upon millions of stars and planets in our own galaxy, never mind all the other galaxies out there, there's almost certainly some kind of life out there, and hopefully one day we as a species will find real evidence for it.